Describe for me what Crazy Crayon was.
Well, I became part owner of this little film company called Trans Radio. It started in 1947, and that's where I made my first animated stuff. And I got a chance to um, be given a partnership in it, just a small part. And I continued to make films for them. And we had some spare time, and we said, why don't we create our own production house of. And so I said, well, I got an idea for a storyteller that's Crazy Crayon. And there's a little girl wombat, because kids like talking animals. And so this Disney-esque little wombat, she would say, and this animated crayon would come dancing around and say, let's tell a story. And this is the story of Kiki. Uh, let's see, I only did two of them. One was a little girl who bounces out of, her mother and father are explorers. They'd catch wild animals. She bounced out of the truck. They didn't even notice, so she starts living with the tigers. And they lived in a bamboo forest, and the striped sun gave her striped suntan. And that film eventually was, so we made it with a soundtrack, and it's a cute little thing.
16 millimeter?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
black and white. It
And
was
how long?
1960. They were, stories I think were 7.5 minutes, something like that. And I know we sent them into Bob Keesham, who showed them on the Captain Kangaroo show.
That must have been fun.
Yeah, it was nice to see them actually on the air,
Yeah.
for free. We didn't get money out of it. But we did. Nobody ever bit though either, so we never made any more of them.
Now, in 1960, you also played Mr. Lion on Bozo Circus.
Yeah.
Describe that.
I had in 1958, Channel 5, which was WHDH TV then, was just starting, and so they were having auditions. So I came in with my puppet show. This was now 3 years after the Rascal Rabbit show. So I came in and had him introduce some characters, and my dragon, which was one of the best because he was talking. Because like King Friday, the mouth didn't move on Rascal Rabbit, but the dragon, I was getting into puppets that talk and move. I think there's a storm brewing outside. I may have to close that window behind us. As a matter of fact, I've got to run around the house a minute, so we'll take a break.
Yeah.
Well, they had an audition at Channel 5, so I auditioned, and it was one of these things where they said, don't call us, we'll call you. And 2 years later, I'd left a phone number at a payphone, because I didn't have my own phone. And I happened to be walking on the beach where that payphone was, and no one else was there. And their phone rang, and I went over and said, person call for Caroll Spinney. Actually, I was known as Ed Spinney then. I used my middle name because I decided not to go through the Air Force being known as Caroll. So I got enough troubles. And so I was Ed for all those years. And so the name stuck to me. Even in Boston, I'm still Ed. And so they said, so it was the same guy who had auditioned me. And he said, I'm starting a summer replacement show for Captain Bob Caudle. And he has a very popular show, but he wants a month off. And I've already got this little singer named Judy Valentine, who was she was a contract player for MGM. Never really got a movie, but she was a great little singer, and she was a cute woman. She's still alive and lives up in Lynn, and very nice person. So we had our own show for a month. It was 6 days a week, 1 hour every day, and 2 hours on Saturday. And the only material that wasn't mine was on Saturday. We'd show a kids' movie, a feature film, and we did the wraparound. And I placed the story on it was called the Judy and Goggle Show, and we placed it on a rocket ship. So they built me a nice set of the inside of a rocket ship, and we were heading for the moon. We never did get there. My brother had built me a beautiful ship model, David, my crippled brother, and we did exterior shots. We'd move the stars slowly behind it. And it was really fabulous. It looked almost as good as some of the Star Trek stuff, which wasn't long after that. And as I played even a live character, and I drew pictures as Mr. Hot Sketch. And we did all these puppets, and most of the puppets, some of them, I had made a goggle myself, which was a large yellow-beaked bird with goggle eyes. Reminded me of something we saw later. But the show we doubled the ratings in 1 month. And so I was sure that we'd get our own show, but they said, no, Bob's back. And so I was very unhappy suddenly I'm out of television again. But Frank Avrush, who was Bozo the Clown, and he's a very dignified man. He always works on tuxedo, introduces classic films, you know. And
Now, he was Bozo the Clown in Boston.
in Boston, yes, Bozo was a franchise character. You could all around the country there'd be different Bozos, same cartoons wrapped around, and lots of live stuff. And it was a cute show, fun show to be on. And I played a lot of characters on that, a lot of costume characters, and
Fully costumed?
full costume, yeah, as well as the puppet segments too. And one I had bought this lion suit, which my mother had made and sold to a different show, and that show was only a summer replacement. So I went to them and I said, "I'll give you $50 for that lion suit," and they said, "Sure." So I went back on the air, and I had Mr. Lion draw pictures. I would take the children's name, and like the name Judy, and write that quickly on curvy letters on a big drawing board, and then while the kids count to 30, turn that into a picture of an animal. Judy would be a good elephant. The J would make a trunk. And that was the very first name I did. And in my tradition of never rehearsing, I never even tried it once at home. I just went on the air and said, "I can draw a picture out of your name. What's your name?" And it worked. Oh,
You
these
done with
kids.
it?
You can't let the kids on the set. You know.
Sorry, there was change in my pocket.
All right.
And it worked.
Yeah, it
Now,
worked amazingly.
and you were
Well, these seats are very low.
are you running a camera?
Caitlin, go ahead.
So you were the lion, and you became Mr. Lion, and this was a common sketch, I guess.
Yeah, and we have little segments in this live show. It was live TV, which is live is more fun than anything, because it's like real show business. Your stage is not the same as a theater, but it's live, and the audience is sitting out there right now, seeing you either do it right or goofing up. And one of the first times I was on, I forgot to have a mic on, and so here on live TV, I'm going. They said, "You haven't got a mic on." I said, "Excuse me, everyone." You know, I go off and get a mic, that kind of thing. You see that on the news shows once in a while, even now, because it's one of the few things that's live. So anyway, I was doing that show, and
Tell me about the format. How long was it?
it was a 3/4 hour show. Now, how many shows do you see that 3/4 hour now? So I went from 1960 to 1970, and the last 15 minutes was a 15-minute cartoon, all cartoon show, like Super Chief or something.
So if no one's seen Bozo the Clown show, what would we see over those 45 minutes?
Well, an opening thing with a parade, and he'd play some games with 155 kids we'd have every day. It was a 1-year waiting list to get your kid on the show, and it was just a lot of fun. And of course the reason why that kind of show is on the end, it puts commercials in it, and so I would do at least as many as 5 different segments in the show. I played Bozo's grandmother, he was always yelling, "Whoa, Nellie." I said, well, I guess his grandmother would be Nellie. So I was a clown, female clown. I had no beard then. You can't put clown makeup on good with a beard and mustache. And I would flip-flop the dancing rag doll, Kooky Kangaroo, the boxing kangaroo with a glass jaw. He would lead with his chin. They'd have 3-year-olds knock him out. And sometimes they wouldn't swing, and I'd have to hit his glove with my chin so I could go. So he had to get knocked out. How else am I going to end the bit? So I did lots of stuff like that. And during Thanksgiving time, I played Peter Pilgrim, and I'd dress up in a red pilgrim suit, make up stuff to do. We just made it up as we went along.
So there'd be sketches throughout. How much of that was puppetry?
Usually just one segment. And that's where I developed Pickle Puss. I made that for a pilot of a show called Friendly Village, with a young woman who used to be Miss Massachusetts and who could sing beautifully. But that pilot didn't make it. It was one of those typical shows, though. Hi, boys and girls. It's so nice here in the Friendly Village. We're going to have fun today, you know. And so I'm glad it didn't make it, really.
Describe Pickle Puss.
So Pickle Puss I made him out of a show card. I just bent a frame, his outline of his chin. Then I made a side thing and made everything out of cardboard. And then I glued some fuzzy cheap cloth I had over it, and with a magic marker scribbled stripes on it to make a stripy little cat. And so he didn't work out on the pilot, so I brought him on the Bozo show. And I first he was the evil, and he would often try to capture Bozo and do the evilest thing, like tickle him. And so he was a source of, he became sort of my Kermit the Frog. Jim Henson's signature character was Kermit. That's the one that started way back. And Pickle Puss sort of was, I kind of still, it didn't do much more than just that, but in '69 I went to a puppet festival, the Puppeteers of America. It was at the University of Utah, Salt Lake City.
Well, one question before we get there. What year or how early on did Pickle Puss arrive?
1967.
So it was later in your years with Bozo.
Yeah, because I was already with him 7 years by then.
And how many episodes per year? Do you remember of Bozo?
Well, I would do 2 shows one week and 3 shows the next. I alternated with a guy who played Clank the Tin Can Man, a guy named Armand Del Grosso. And he was funny in his way. He was a tin knocker. He made tin stuff for your hot air furnace. So he made himself a big tin suit. And he called himself Clank the Tin Can Man. He walked in one day with that on and showed Frank of Roost. He says, "You're hired." And he made up some other characters after that. He was funny. So he would have 2 shows one week. So I had already moved to, I moved out to Woodstock. So it's an hour and 20-minute ride from here then. Now it's hour 10. Speedier. Better roads. So it was, when it was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I was really tired of driving to Boston. But
And then what station did it air on?
on WHDH television, Channel 5.
And where specifically were the studios?
On Morrissey Boulevard over on towards Dorchester.
And was it live for the entire time you were there with the show?
The last year, they started cutting money. The last year I was there, we lost the live audience. I said, "How can we have a circus?" I tried to get them. I said, "Let's do some recording this time. Let's get a lot of cheering." Because there's lots of cheering with the Mr. Ringmaster behind the camera, like the warm-up guy. Get them to cheer and yell. And let's get a lot of that so we can just give the impression. I'll make a whole bunch of puppet heads, and we'll have a fake audience. They wouldn't do that. So it came on, here's the Bozo Show. He'd come out in some ring. There's nobody there. It was really dull. And I said, we'll give the illusion of, you won't be able to play with the kids anywhere, but at least when the show opens, we'll hear the cheering and little heads bumping up and down and a gobo of a circus tent, which is just an outline, a silhouette they shoot through. And they wouldn't do any of that. They had no production values. The production values went, whew. Now he just led into cartoons and commercials. So it kind of went down to almost nothing. And they let Clank go, who was very unhappy about it, and because he thought that I was the one that should have been let go, because he told me. We later on became friends again. And so the show is kind of getting, and I decided I kind of felt that I'd been wasting my time on just a cheap little commercial show, and I wasn't doing anything particularly important. I lamented I didn't take college courses to become a teacher, and suddenly I had this chance to, I went to this puppet festival, and I gave I'd gone to the one year before, and I built this show to impress everybody. I'm using animation. I made a theater. I built it myself out of aluminum tubing that all screwed together, and it was beautifully covered with black shiny velvet, and a big rear screen projection. And I did animated backgrounds that would move, so I wanted to combine the media of animation so that you could have moving scenery and characters that dance on the screen and would jump out and come out in person. And I was giving that show at Salt Lake, and I discovered Jim Henson was going to be in the audience. And I had met him
let's stop
earlier.
there. When's the first time you met Jim Henson?
In 1962, a fellow named Gordon Bennett put together a puppet festival up at the school in Sturbridge, and they invited the Boston Guild. It was the Boston Guild, and of puppetry, and they invited the New York Guild. And to their amazement, Jim Henson showed up with Frank Oz and Jerry Jewell, and they put on a fabulous 3/4 hour show, and it was stuff I've never seen him do since. It's awesome stuff. It was before he had invented Rolf. I saw him again the next year.
Well, describe that show.
Well, it had like 8 different segments. One of them was marching soldiers, which were all made of little wooden soldiers and a barking drill sergeant who never said any real words. He'd march them, and they'd get tired, and then finally shooting practice. They were all carrying little guns, and they could bring the guns down like this. So he goes, he puts up this little target, and he steps back, and goes on the other side. They're all aiming at the target. He says, "Hump, hump, her," and they all do a 180, and all the guns are facing it. Boom! And they blow them right off the street. And it was just incredible, the stuff he did. We were just in awe. It was really incredible.
Set up who Jim Henson was at that point, and you said Frank.
Well, I had first seen Jim Henson in a commercial. He started the key to his success were 2 things. He got on the air at a channel in Washington D.C. and because he was going to the University of Maryland, and he and his wife Jane gave a twice-a-day show, a 5-minute show, Sam and Friends. It was tagged on to the end of a news show, and so he did. At that time, he didn't do voices. They just always would use records and lip sync to records, like Keely Smith and what was that guy she was married to, but they and Sam was this funny little guy who he would always have. Guy named Ike, and he would do this voice. He would take it from records, just funny stuff. And so somebody wanted to make a commercial, and so he made little 8-second commercials. And the first brand was Wilkins Coffee, like a little character come on. He's got a little cannon, and so they kind of looked a little bit like Kermit the Frog, and one was on a lighter guy, and one's a little heavy version of Kermit. Hi, do you drink Wilkins coffee? No. Boom! Blows them all away. Then he turns the can and faces you. How about you? Do you drink Wilkins coffee? 8 seconds. And it was so he franchised that thing and made it for other brands. Up here it was La Touraine Coffee in Boston, and it came on the air. And it was the most. I said that's the best puppet thing I've ever seen in my life. And it was only 8 seconds. So we got to looking for those, and you'd end up on the floor. He'd just blow you away. It was just incredible. I said, now that's puppetry. That is how, and it was the first puppet that really worked on television. And he started with television, really. And so he was just pure television. He also was a genius. That helped a lot. He's the only true genius I ever knew. And Frank Oz is pretty much a genius, but not the same kind of genius as Jim. He was really incredible.
So with these commercials that were airing in Boston, how did you know it was Jim Henson?
Well, then the next time I saw him, they said, Ed Sullivan, on tonight on the show we have this young puppeteer, Jim Jensen. And later Jim says, that's Henson. And he introduced him. And in those days, Jim was a really slender guy. And he'd come out, he always dressed kind of cool, except his pants were always about 4 inches too short. So you saw his whole ankle. I always went, why does he wear such short pants? And he did that for years until he got much cooler with his clothes. Later on, he was very cool after that. But anyway, I said, oh, so that's who does it. And then when only a year or two later, where he came up to Sturbridge and did the thing, and then a year later, he was at a puppet festival at Sir Hurleyville, which is up in the Catskills. I forget what's the name of the place now.
Well, but so in *62,
Hurleyville.
When you saw that first show, did you talk to him? Did you meet him?
Yeah. He said, that effect. It's funny. He said he then saw me do my own show. It was Goggle, who had already been on the air, and I have a live bit I do with Goggle, where Goggle is quite an obnoxious puppet character. And finally, I can't get him off the stage, and you can just hear me. He said, "Get off the stage! It's time for us to leave." I ain't leaving. And so finally, I strangle him. You see a human hand come up and Jim really liked that. And so he said to me, "Oh, I kind of liked your show. Oh, why don't you come down to New York and talk about the Muppets?" I said, "Oh, gee, that'd be good." I never got around to it. But it sounded like we were just going to go down and talk shop, like hobbyists, And he wasn't a hobbyist. and nor were puppets have never been my hobby either. I did them strictly to make a living with them. It wasn't I fascinated with them that I have to play with them. I never touch them unless I want to do a show.
Let's go back for a second. This one show that you saw in '62 and you were so impressed with. Did you go backstage afterwards and talk to him?
Yeah,
and
well, I was backstage afterwards. Yeah, and I told him how much I liked his stuff. He said, "Oh, thank you." You know, and but it wasn't then that I did my show, and then he had something to talk about because he'd seen my show too.
So you just went up to him and said hello, and I love your work.
Yeah, because I think I followed him right after him.
Oh, I see. So you were performing at the
There
same
too.
time, and he saw your work.
Yeah.
And how did he describe the Muppets when he first told you about them?
Well, I had seen it, and I'd seen him on the air, and
So at that point, I'm sorry, but the commercials that he had, that certainly the ones that looked like Kermit, he had called them Muppets
oh yeah,
at that point.
I think he and Jane came up with the name. Funny, there were two stories about that. One, it was the name combination of the name of marionette and puppet, M for marionette. That was the story they both told for quite a while, and later on they said, no, it wasn't made that. It was just a name. It sounded good, and it wasn't made from that. So I never knew, since they both told the same, both different stories. I don't know. I always thought that it was just the best name I've ever heard anybody make up. Muppet. My God, people have tried to copy it and everything, but you just can't come up with anything so succinctly. It says puppet. Some people, I remember a lady coming up to me one time at a puppet festival some years later. She said, I want to show you my puppets. I only have pictures. I call my show The Muppets. I said, I was working for the Muppets by then. I said, we already used that. She says, that's why I'm using it. It's such a good name. I said, okay. Then I said, Jim is there, and she walked up and showed, she says, look at and the puppets look just like Bert. They would rip off of Bert. She says, I call my show The Muppet Show. And he said, very nice. Or as he would say, lovely. He didn't even say, he said, what's she going to do? She's going to hurt me. So he didn't.
But when he said, you should come down to New York and talk with the Muppets, that wasn't enough of an invitation for
Well,
you?
apparently no. He was so soft-spoken, I didn't recognize an invitation for a job, because later on, in 1969, when I gave the show that he saw at my big production, everything went wrong with that production. They put on a big spotlight. It was amateurs running the theater. It was college students. And I realized I couldn't see the screen. And we'd set it up carefully before dinner. And it worked perfectly. I could see it. I had to be able to see it. I'm kneeling below it. I had to have a kneeling situation, because otherwise the theater would have been over 12 feet tall. And I wouldn't be able to use it in a lot of theaters. So I had to have it, so I worked standing on my knees. And so I looked up, and I'd have to, because I had to synchronize my movement of my characters with the characters I had already filmed in animation on the screen. And I couldn't even see them. I was running things with knee switches, because nothing was synchronized together. I'd have to turn the tape on when I saw the first little sign I had made on the screen, and that would start the music, which I had all queued up. And I got out of sync with the music. I got out of sync, and I had to finally stop the show, and I said, I have to cue things up. There's something wrong. I stood up and said, I had already introduced it standing out in front anyway, so this is live and experimental. It's an effort to combine the media. And so I then explained, I said, we're having a problem. Can we put that light out up there? Can we get that light out? We don't know how. So so they said, we're working on it. So I keep looking at, I see this burned out white spot shining on my middle of the screen, and so I have my puppet Pickle Puss back on again. And he says, well, has anybody got a rifle? And I finally go behind the screen myself, which has just a white light shining on it now, and I've now started doing a shadow puppet theater of myself, pulling my hair out, And so Jim Henson came backstage afterwards and said, I liked what you were trying to do. And then he then cited some cases where they'd made huge mistakes themselves. They'd gone all the way for an hour ride off to do a show and left the tape in the workshop. So they had no soundtrack. Then there's no show. And stories like that. The first appearance of Rolf, his ear fell off. It was only pinned on, they forgot to sew it, because they pushed it together at the last second. So things like that. But so then he said, I liked what you were trying to do. He said,
Now at this point was now 69.
Right.
Was he even more famous? And
Yeah,
well
because
known?
he had 5 scheduled appearances every year on the Ed Sullivan Show contract. He was doing lots of other commercials. He did a series for La Choy Chop Suey, and La Choy, yeah, La Choy. I guess it's La
I
Choy.
think it's Troy. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, "Hi, I'm the La Choy Dragon," and he even had a flamethrower. Frank Oz was inside this rubber suit. He hated it, and I didn't work for him then. But one time he had actual flamethrower, and he actually sets the whole kitchen set on fire. They had all kinds of extinguishers ready. They must have had to get all kinds of permits for that. Sort of huge. The whole place was real flames. Now they'd make fake flames, but and the funniest commercials. So he'd gotten more and more well known.
Was Frank Oz at that festival as well?
No,
But you had heard that Henson was going to be there.
no, I didn't know he was there until I discovered he was in the audience. He was scouting for somebody to play Big Bird and Oscar.
Got it.
It's called being in the right place at the right time. And apparently doing somewhat of the right thing because Pickle Puss was very funny in my desperation. It was funnier than the junk I wrote. And I did have a couple of really successful scenes in that. I finally got synced up like a seagull that flies into an endless swamp of stuff I'd learned from Canadian Film Board, which put out the most wonderful experimental stuff. So I studied their stuff and copied the idea of endless zoom. And I had an Acme animation stand I could use all I wanted, which is computer thing. This was 1969. I've never touched a computer since, but you could pre-program it. And I've never touched one since. But I did a good job with that. And I got a huge applause on that part. So, he saw that I could do something. Anyway, he
And the conversation then.
then said, "Why don't you come down and talk about the Muppets?" I said, déjà vu. He said that to me in 1962. I said, "What do you mean?" He says, working for me. I said, he asked me to work for him in 1962. He didn't even remember having met me. He said, "Did I ever meet you before?" I said, "Yeah, 62." And so at 63, he was too busy. I never met him. And so I did go down to New York, and he opened a drawer. They were full of Rolf the dogs, like a whole bunch of them. We put one on, and the only lesson I ever got from him was that he said, "Hi, I'm Rolf the dog." And I tried one on. I said, "I'm Rolf." And he said, "See, you're moving the top. You try to get the top of your hand steady, because we don't talk like that, and the lower jaw is what wiggles up and down. And so you try to keep the top fairly steady, because otherwise I'd lose focus on you if I keep talking." Anyway, that was my one lesson.
Fantastic. And we'll change tapes.
My lawn is rejoicing.
Yeah.
Hasn't
Is it
rained over a
raining?
month.
Oh, it is.
Mm.